Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I do realize it's Friday afternoon. I do realize you just had this lunch and so many inspiration and so many things to talk about. So I would like everyone to come back in for the last session of this already beautiful conference. Because on stage we have another keynote speaker from the United Kingdom. He's the author of a best-selling book, and that book is called The Pain-Free Mindset. But our next speaker is also the clinical lead in Berkshire for BLISS, which stands for Berkshire Long COVID Integrated Service. And the NHS has awarded this service with an extra £50,000 in order to push long COVID service even further. So I'm going to ask you to give him a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Deepak Ravindran.
Thank you. Right, well, good afternoon. It's always difficult to fill in the spot just after lunch on the last day of the conference. So I've got to aim to keep you awake and keep you interested and actually enthused about a topic that's become a passion project for me. For a lot of you, my background is in pain medicine, but my role is now as a long COVID clinician. And on this stage today, I'm going to be talking to you about what is long COVID in terms of what we understand about the new condition, and probably then leave you with a little bit of the challenges as I see it now, but also the opportunities for digital therapeutics, and probably more specifically VR from my understanding and my learning of the last 2 days. So thank you, Remco and VR for Rehab and Joe for inviting me and making me part of such an exciting 2 days that has been for me, and a lot of learning as well, I hope is there. So I've got a few hats that I wear, but I got COVID. For me, my personal journey was I got the alpha version of COVID in March. It was 12 days of the worst time that I've ever experienced, with pain everywhere, with a lot of symptoms that I just couldn't explain, didn't fit with anything that I ever had before. It was not the flu anybody would tell me, and I know what a man flu is. And it was horrible. 13 days there, and on the 13th day, I did turn around, but one of my colleagues, a consultant colleague of mine, who at the same time caught it, on the 14th day, he turned for the worse, got admitted, and he was the first consultant in my hospital to pass away. And there was a very sobering point there, but it's not just the people who died. I started to become aware, and we started to talk about in the UK by March, April, of people who did not die, but then were having a poor quality of life. And there was this growing thought that we need to be doing something more in an integrated fashion for people who are going to be alive, but not living, their quality of life that they need. And so I was part of the authors who wrote to the House of Lords a policy paper there, and it is partly that along with a series of couple of other publications, and there was such a huge amount of patient voice that led to the UK still being the only country with actually a government mandated program of almost 90 dedicated clinics for looking after long COVID patients. I'm the lead for one of them. So this is my experience, and this is our understanding right now of this condition. So hands up for any of you. How many of you know about the condition of long COVID? How many of you know of somebody personal close by who has this condition? Okay, so hopefully a lot of this resonates with you, but also there are points that you can take away to the declaration of interest, keenly interested in digital therapeutics, but a few other declarations that I have on there. So I'm going to phrase this talk in a series of questions, and I think given the audience and the diversity of the audience that I have with me, it's going to be looking in terms of, well, the first most question is, what do we know about long COVID? And actually, in that sense, the theme of this Congress is the patient stupid? So actually, I probably will let Rachel say more.
Hello, my name is Rachel Corrigan. I'm 21 years old and I'm a student at Reading University. I've been asked to do a short video summarising my long COVID experience. I'm more than happy to do this because I guess it's a form of self-processing for me, and any way to sort of, I don't know, raise awareness about my experience, I think is great. So I first got COVID when I was 19, so the very first strand back in the day. I was asymptomatic at the time, so I was carrying on sort of doing everyday routine. Just to paint a picture for you, I was probably at the peak of my fitness, running most days. I was a long distance runner, eating very healthily, like honestly, just happy, and I didn't have any sort of vulnerability whatsoever. So yeah, very much happy uni student, freshers, enjoying life. So yeah, I was asymptomatic, and then 3 months after having caught it, it was one night where I was feeling fine, and then all of a sudden I collapsed and had what was suspected seizures, 5 of them in a row, which was pretty scary, the fact it changed so quickly and without much warning. So I went to hospital, an ambulance came, and this was Reading Hospital, and I stayed there, and they did some tests, and then they discharged me. I returned home, but from home I had a mixture of symptoms that kind of came in clusters. I had diagnosed bradycardia, tachycardia and arrhythmia. So at times, I think it was recorded, my heart went up to about 128, then dropped to 32 beats per second in a very short amount of time. Thus, this caused me to collapse, to feel dizzy, to lose consciousness. So I had a lot of that happening quite unexpectedly, and quite a few times throughout the day. As well as that, I had other sort of weird sensations, so like a buzzing in my head, almost like sort of like static electricity. I had weird sensations with swallowing, with my teeth. I felt like I just wanted someone to like punch my teeth. I know that sounds ridiculous. My neck muscles felt all weird, and I had, as well as that, very difficulty breathing. A couple of times an ambulance had to be called because I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like only like half my lung was working, or I was massive effort and it was all out of sync and out of rhythm. I had chest pain. Those were sort of, I guess, the main symptoms that I found harder to manage. As well as that, I had sort of the classic fatigue, tiredness, and yeah, well, this lasted about a year on and off. It came in clusters. I had worse days. I had a period of a couple of days where I felt better, and I thought, oh, you know, I might be over this long COVID, and then I'd go massively downhill again. So yeah, I think it's just sudden, it's unexpected, and it was a time where I couldn't even go for a walk without sometimes getting these symptoms and panicking. And I mean, that's a massive difference from what I was before uni life. So it was really hard for me physically, because I felt like, there's nothing I can do to help my body, but mentally as well, because exercise, yeah, well, that used to be my stress relief. I know I'm talking for a while, sorry, I'll carry on. But I had to return home, had to uni online, which was kind of a blessing in disguise at the time. It allowed that flexibility, because I wouldn't have been able to step foot on campus with everything that was going on. I just also wanted to highlight that in the COVID times, I had all these hospital visits, the 4 ambulances, the acute assessment ward, all the doctor's appointment, hospital appointments, and all of this alone. No family was allowed to come see me, and I was always referred to as sort of a rare or a strange case, because I got long COVID back at the beginning, where no one had really seen these cluster of symptoms before. So that definitely did have an impact on my mental health as well. I was extremely anxious. I was worried. I kept the, I suppose, low mood kind of goes with that one as well. So yeah, wasn't great. I lasted, yeah, as I said, over a year. So I was beginning to have panic attacks. I'm just feeling pretty pretty low and down. But in January, my symptoms started to reduce, which was great. I still had the sort of anxiety side of it, but I returned back to campus. I started sort of getting involved in stuff again. I had counselling from the university. I definitely needed therapy in order to get over my anxiety because yeah, I didn't know where long COVID had come from. I didn't know if it was going to start to reappear because every day was up and down. Am I better? Am I not? It was a definite whirlwind. So yeah. Anyway, where I am now, about a year and a half on, I'm feeling much better. I'm running again, yay! I'm doing exercise, but I'm still not completely over it. So I have fatigue. I have my days where I feel like I've overdone it, which I wouldn't have had before, and the symptoms start to reappear a bit. It's kind of hard to balance it all at the moment, but I'm definitely feeling much better than I did. The symptoms have kind of gone away, but yeah, I still think it has that sort of knock-on effect still, and I'm still trying to manage and cope as best as I can. My notes have just fallen. Sorry. So yeah, no, that's my experience. It's been awful, but I really am praying that this recovery stays and I'm over the worst of it. And I want to thank so much Reading GP, but then also the Reading hospital, because they've been great. They've got me through all the tests, all the MRIs, ECGs, EEGs, test stress test, tilt test, all of these blooming tests. They've been great, and I haven't had to wait long, which is, I suppose, the one reassuring thing throughout everything. So yeah, massive thank you. And yeah, if anyone's got any further questions, don't hesitate to ask. Bye.
So that, in a way, Rachel's story, I hope, summarizes for you that there is a lot of hope, but the journey is much longer. 15 to 17 months from the time when nobody understood the condition to where we are now. And to a great extent, that's what we're dealing with. This is a condition that we haven't studied in our medical textbooks. It hasn't fitted the profile of anything that we've understood and grown up with. There are shades of similarities, but in effect, this is a condition of multiple symptoms affecting multiple systems. And the challenge is that there is no association with severity. More than 80 to 90% of the patients coming to my long COVID service have been people who have never been admitted to a hospital, let alone an ICU. And the initial assumption that we were all making is the people who got the more severe illness will be the ones who left with long COVID, but that I can assure you is not the case. Most people struggling with symptoms, multiple symptoms from multiple organs, are people who have been very mild to moderate to asymptomatic, in fact, which means this is not something that really fits within your natural history of how we understand medications and conditions and treatment paradigms, are not going to fit it. And the understanding is changing, and this changing understanding is really being influenced by how patients view it. In fact, long COVID is a very much patient-coined name rather than a sort of medically associated and classification there. And the problem is actually massive. This is actually, in the UK data, is right now the most recent one that came at the beginning of this month is 3% of the UK population have long COVID. So imagine, out of us, at a stroke, you've got 3% of the population affected with a condition that is unknown, lasting usually beyond 12 to 14 months, and has got multiple issues that are being, right now in Rachel's case, she had to go through a journey of multiple ambulance visits, multiple hospital admissions, multiple investigations. Think about the healthcare expenditure that has gone through, but it is the resource utilization as we are understanding. How can we learn from this and make it more streamlined? The second part to think about it is the symptoms are there, but this set of data that's come out from the Office of National Statistics still does not take in the data from care homes, from university halls, from residences, from other sort of protected institutions. So it still might be an underestimate. But in effect, we are looking at 3 million population, more than 2 million. But also that 1.4 million have had a significant impact on their day-to-day activities. And these are people in the age group of Rachel, 18 to 25, 40 years of age group. These are your economically productive members of society. to the extent that the Financial Times therefore then thinks about and talks about the labor shortages and the fact that long COVID is really going to be a problem. And about, if you go to Europe, this is what the data I got a little bit, I didn't get a comprehensive summary there, but this captured the data as of July last year, the number of long COVID cases that are there. I managed to look at the one from April last year, this year, for Europe. And if as per last data, 96 million cases of COVID. And if we take the WHO's conservative understanding that 10% of the population with COVID are likely to be left with long COVID symptoms, you have potentially got 10 million cases in Europe that are possibly having this problem. And in the US, you can imagine the scale of numbers there, to the extent that the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very well-respected journal, has actually said that pandemic, it is probably another pandemic, which is my title of talk as well. It is actually a national health disaster that's waiting to happen for them. The symptoms, therefore, are a little bit weird. I mean, as you've heard Rachel say, it affects every single organ of the body. And therefore, the symptoms that I've had in the clinic have been completely varied from patient to patient. There are some themes and similarities, and I'll sort of encourage on that line there, but these are the kind of symptoms that have been reported across the board in multiple studies. And in fact, one particular study that came out in the middle of last year from Davis Group, which is a patient-led research collaboration, said they actually looked at 56 countries and spoke to 3,700 participants and above, 200 symptoms from over 10 organ systems. Nothing that doctors or any clinicians in general practice, primary care, secondary care, or specialist care would ever be able to have something that would account for this or make an understanding of this. The most common themes, the symptoms that come through, are fatigue, of course, pain, shortness of breath, brain fog or concentration problems. Headache is another very common recognized phenomenon. New onset mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and then GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting, bloating, cardiac symptoms, heart rate problems, palpitations, and then finally loss of taste and smell in a reasonable percentage of the population. In fact, the National Institute of Healthcare Research in 2020 suggested that long COVID, again, is an umbrella term, but it should not be thought of as one condition. So it's again, it might be simplistic and a simple heuristic for us to say, oh, it's long COVID. But actually, long COVID patients probably also come from 4 or 5 different clusters. The people who've been in ICU probably have a slightly different version of those who are asymptomatic to those who are different there. So all of this needs to be taken into fact that the diagnosis from the World Health Organization for this really different and unique condition goes on these paths there. They say that at this point, you still don't need vaccine, sort of COVID confirmatory test, so you can have the condition without it. You can have varying symptoms. It should not be explained by any other diagnosis. But what mostly is that this is a living definition. As we understand more about this condition, the definition is likely to change and is going to be affected there. But we don't have any blood tests. We don't have any imaging right now to say if this is true or this is elevated or this sign is there, it's long COVID. We don't have that as yet. So then the causes become very unusual. 200 symptoms, 10 organ systems, so many problems there. What are the common themes? And if you think back, and the data from the research is establishing that if you think about it, what are the 2 or 3 common themes that run through all our bodies? It's our nervous system, it's our immune system, and it's our circulation. These are the 3 common themes that run through our entire body there and are responsible and present in every part. So therefore, right now, it's not surprising that these are really the top ones that are dominating all the research papers and everything that's coming through. The virus could be hanging about still. So persistent viral remnants in the tummy, in the abdomen, or in the nose is one particular theory that's been explored and a school of thought. But what if the virus affected the immune system? Absolutely. Immune system hyperactivity is like the top order cause there, that there is inflammation or a low-grade inflammation that's still going on. The immune system is deeply interlinked and connected to the nervous system. So the nervous system could either be affected by the virus, leaving behind an inflammation, or the nervous system itself becomes hypersensitive and highly elevated and stays that way. And then, of course, if these immune complexes and these small immune clots get together and they're going to the smaller and smaller circulatory parts. Could they be getting stuck somewhere? And that becomes the microclot theory for long COVID. That's again dominating the press and the conversation and the research. But we still don't have any clarity on which way this is going. And you see patients with probably the outcome and the symptoms of all of these systems being affected there. So what can we do? Who is more at risk? Could we establish that from the research to say these are the people likely to get? And we've got some signals from some studies that have come through. I like this data from the one person summarizing it in the Daily Telegraph there in the UK, is actually this is what we understand. If you're going to have women or between the ages of 30 to 60, if you're going to have asthma or a pre-existing diabetes, pre-existing poor mental health, pre-existing autoantibodies, you have lots of initial symptoms, then these are one of the 9 factors that are supposedly putting you at a higher risk of getting or having long COVID. And if you see the age group here, the majority of people with long COVID are in this economically productive age group. So it is imperative that we, as a society and as a group, really look at what we need to do, because this is a very, very important demographic as far as the economy is concerned. And the more, again, it's obviously more common in females there. The other part that's come through in the research is that if you're a key worker, healthcare, education, social health, then the chances are that you're going to be left with higher comorbidities, not surprisingly, and again, deprivation, social issues also come to play. And that works out, if you look at the impact, I've put out this 1.4 million out of the 2 million in the UK are people whose impact on daily activities is significant. You can see how much of an impact on the slide here in terms of day-to-day activities are affected there. So what are the treatments we right now are thinking about? What can we do? And the challenge is, we're still understanding the condition. What we do know is that this is a long-term condition. It is like much of hypertension or asthma. We have to find ways to manage it, keep it under control, help the patients, support them there. But right now, the silver bullet is unlikely to happen. We might get a few more biomarkers, but given that it is a complex condition affecting these many symptoms, I don't think we'll get a silver bullet, but what we'll have to find is a suite of tools and strategies and techniques that help people get their quality of life back. The rehabilitation becomes paramount in this condition here, and I think that's where we are probably at this stage now. I mean, we did put a lot of work in our service in trying to get it work there. We've been recognized part there. But our local data actually suggests that conditions like pain are probably far more common than what the Office of National Statistics puts there. When you calculate the headache, the aches and pains, the abdominal pains, the tummy problems, the chest pains, each of these get reported separately in the other statistics. But when you look at all of these, together, pain occupies almost 75%. Fatigue is almost 80 to 90%. Shortness of breath is again a very common symptom there. And then mental symptoms, new onset anxiety and depression, about 50% of them. Brain fog is an extremely common presentation. 70% also have concentration and memory problems. The research is really great in terms of how much recognition and support is going out now. In the US, we've got $1.3 billion that have gone out there. With the UK, it's about 30 million pounds. Europe has also given a fair amount of money, though I don't have the exact numbers, to the extent that even the patient-led research collaboratives are now securing funds from, for example, they got $3 million from Balvi, which is the consortium led by Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum. So he's given that money for just long COVID research. And they're getting a lot of work that's coming through from a variety of organizations. These are all some of the studies that have all been done already. So for example, there's a fancy form of xenon MRI that looks at lung changes and parenchymal changes. You've got some studies being done in Germany on how you clean out the clots. But I think all of these are still ongoing, and we're still a couple of years from getting anything useful out on that front. We've heard yesterday from Harry in terms of COVID rehabilitation. So virtual reality is being considered on that front there. Drugs, as usual, there are a huge number of trials that have been started in different countries looking at different drugs. Drugs to control the heart rate, antihistamines, anti-inflammatories, antivirals, but we are no close to the answer, and I suspect that even when it comes, like the way we talk about VR, too few, too many, I don't think it'll be the one answer for all long COVID patients, so we need a suite of treatments there. My reasoning, which comes from sort of the way I talk about it in my book as well for pain, is that I think we need to find a way to actually incorporate these treatments in a personalized, individualized treatment plan for patients. There could be a role for medications, there should be a role for interventions, but we need to get the neuroscience and the stress management. We need to talk about the diet and the microbiome and how we optimize that. We need to think about sleep tracking, monitoring, and optimizing. We need to think about physical activity and rehabilitation incorporation. And we need to think about a lot of mind-body therapies, whether they are behavioral therapies or trauma-based therapies, but we need to bring all that in a platform or an ecosystem, and you can see the opportunities for digital therapeutics and virtual reality in a number of ways like this. But how do you integrate all of this? That is the challenge, and I think that I'll probably come to the last parts there, is what are the challenges that I perceive right now. What the main thing is actually in countries that don't have a long COVID clinic to start with, how are you going to get a common flow and a process of patients coming to a service so that you can get the research done in a uniform manner? I'm aware that I think when I saw the data there, France is doing it all in community care. There's one clinic in Spain. There are a couple of clinics in Germany. Netherlands has got a few of these clinics there. But unlike the UK, which has kind of put in this plow for a centralized command of so many clinics, all of us reporting our outcome measures to the central data, a data bank that's being built up across the country in terms of all the numbers, the outcomes, the symptoms, I think it's always going to be a challenge in getting consistency so that you can do good quality research and roll out treatments and techniques. The definition, as I said, the living definition is good, but it also means that a consensus is lacking, and the WHO thing that's come out last 2 months is quite good, so there's some clarity there. We don't have enough biomarkers, so that's something to think about there. But the main thing is the funding. We talked about the resource allocation for personnel. We all have a shortage of healthcare personnel across the continent and across the US. How are we going to tackle that? From the patient perspective, what I've noticed right now, the pandemic has accelerated digital adoption, not just in rehab and pain and long COVID, but also in every other specialty. So I have patients who come with multimorbidity, long COVID symptoms, they're tired, they're fatigued, and then they've got an app that they've got from their GPs to look after their blood results from primary care. They've got an app that tells them to look after their kidney problem. They've got an app that looks after their diabetes. They've got an app that I'm suggesting to look at for breathing and calm and whatever headspace. And then I've got an app to look after that. For long COVID, I've got a living with digital dashboard that I'm rolling out to them. They get apathy. There's a total fatigue that they get. They're saying, I can't do 7 apps. So I think we really need to think about that as a challenge for some conditions, that how are we going to get an ecosystem where we can provide all this in one package. And I think the opportunities now exist. Having seen and been part of a wonderful 2 days where I've seen so many different manufacturers, talks, seeing the potential for rehabilitation there, all these are the symptoms that you see in long COVID. And all of these, there's already proof of concept or in fact regular programs that are there. Now, how can we collaborate? How can we actually bring together recognizing apathy and adoption as a big thing? Where can we make that, move the needle and improve that? And I think that is where the challenge and the opportunity lies. How can we collaborate to create something that the patient will find convenient, easy, sticky, and it's the patient at the end. So I'll leave you with the final thoughts that it is a long-term condition, the opportunities are there, but the challenges exist, and we've talked about some of them today, too few or too many, but I think this is a ripe time for an integrated system to be thought about for a condition like this as it evolves and changes. Thank you.
Deepak, thank you very much for this brilliant talk. Oh, there my mic is on. Brilliant talk, and thank you for showing us that video and showing us the complexity of the problem we are facing here. But also a great need for an integral or a multi-stage solution here. So are there any questions for Deepak from the audience?
As a post-lunch, they've gone to sleep.
They've gone, oh, there.
Thank you, Joe.
Good old Joe.
I know, and I hate public speaking, I have to tell you. So, Deepak, thank you very much. A brilliant presentation as ever. You posed a question: how can we address this? And I'm going to put it right back to you. Given the complexity, given the extent of the problem, given our limited sort of resources, how do we even begin to tackle this here problem?
Damn it, I didn't expect that. My initial thoughts on this are, I think we at Remco give that example of social engineering and prescribing there, where we talked about the fact that we need to be looking at digital therapeutics and managing this condition. Because of the scale of how it is, we need to be finding a way to go into primary care or community health. I think Chris talked about how we should be approaching pain treatment in a different paradigm. I would probably say that those would be the steps that we engineer or work towards an ecosystem where we have everyone singing from the same hymn sheet. So let's take long COVID as an example and say this is a complex condition. All of these could have some benefit, and these are the things that need to be done. If we don't have enough therapists or people to do them, who could we bring in initially to then help train up and then deliver digital therapeutics accordingly to be the scalable solution to reach out there and get mass encouragement. But first is going to be that awareness piece of saying this needs to be a collaborative system-wide approach rather than single clinics doing it one place, because scaling then always becomes tricky. You haven't factored in. There was one thing about data, and that's where I brought this topic up this afternoon as well. For example, my local situation is I've got an electronic health system that is very protective. It's a system that the hospital likes, but that system is different from what primary care has. And so if we have a digital therapeutic solution that these providers come with, which provides a data set, and we want the data to be read, to be used as trending, to be valuable in terms of analytics and separated out, how are we going to get this talking to different systems and making sure the integration piece is there? I think all of this needs to be thought at a system level before we just roll it out in one clinic or one hospital.
Okay. Another question I have, we saw COVID come in certain waves. So it came, it went back again, a new variety showed up, and another wave came, and we all went in lockdown. And you know, it didn't move linear. It came in waves. Did long COVID also come in waves? And the question behind it: do you think if we have had the last wave of COVID, will long COVID then disappear?
Good question. Interesting. I think probably in relation to that, I'll just cover this one piece which somebody asked me yesterday about the role of vaccines in long COVID. And I think probably the evidence right now stands that yes, being vaccinated reduces the severity of COVID, but it doesn't prevent the long COVID. So there is that challenge there that now if you're getting waves of COVID and the risk is that it's not associated with severity of how you got your COVID, then there is going to be a chance that long COVID is going to keep occurring in a proportion of patients. Now, when COVID or the virus eventually becomes very mild and exists and then becomes maybe something like a flu, hopefully, in the next few times, then there is going to be a much smaller percentage of people getting stuck with long COVID symptoms. So the rates, I suspect, will proportionately decrease, but I don't think it will be that we will not see any long COVID anymore. It's just it will become much lower in numbers. I think now we've had a massive number. We're getting 90 referrals a month to our clinic even now. So unfortunately, our waiting times are high for the resources allocated to it, but it hasn't reduced at all in the last 16 months since we started.
And I'm looking for positive signs here. That's why I asked this question. Another thing, in your experience, how long does it take to get over long COVID in the patient? We saw it took over a year. What are you seeing? Is that
so the sense I'm getting from my clinic is that this is not a condition that gets better in 3 weeks at all.
No.
It's not even 3 months. The biggest bunch or amount of improvement is happening between the 8 to 12, 14-month mark. So that is the period of time that most people are improving, but I'm not getting people who are, I suppose there is a bias, a selection bias in the sense that people who are almost better don't come to the clinic. So I don't know someone who's out there like maybe Rachel, who's almost feeling better, has the occasional fatigue, but has figured out how to manage it and says, you know what, I don't want to bother the NHS, they're already too strapped. So I don't know that group of people, but the people who are coming through, I have not had complete cures. Even after 12 months, they're 80, 90% better. But what I've realized is that they have unwittingly found something, a balance of their life. They've taken up meditation, they've taken up mindfulness, they've taken up healthy eating, they've reduced their work stressors, they've managed to pace themselves and manage their fatigue better. So they've carved out a quality of life where they say, if I do this, this, and this, I'm better enough. I'm not taking any drugs, I don't want anything, so I'm happy enough to manage it this way. I don't have complete cure. So the 8 to 14 month mark is what I'm seeing the biggest improvements in.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for this very interesting and insightful presentation, scary a bit, leaving us with yet another great jigsaw puzzle to solve.
Indeed.
With a zillion pieces, but thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Deepak Ravindran.
Thank you.
All right, you might have guessed it, of course. This is the long COVID session of VR4Rehab, which is completely funded by the European Union. So thank the European Union for that. I remember in the early days of VR4Rehab, we, as a consortium, had our meetings online. And we were in all kinds of video, and we discussed amongst each other what should we do to help out in the COVID pandemic. And then we decided, well, we do what we're good at, and that was using our methodology to see how virtual reality can help reducing COVID. And in the VR4Rehab project, we had the methodology of doing hackathons, and then game jam, and then challenges. So we said, why don't we do a hackathon specialized on long COVID and a game jam and then challenges? So we did. So we organized a hackathon, an online hackathon, of course, because we couldn't get together. Everyone was in his own bedroom or bathroom or living room or wherever behind the screen. But we had 16 teams from all over Europe joining that hackathon. And the hackathon lasted a week. And we had great fun, and I remember trying to host a jury with 11 people from all over. It was fun and excitement, but a few winners came out of that hackathon, and then they went on in the summer. And in the summer they did a game jam, and and we were hoping that the pandemic would be over by the end of the summer. So we organized the finale of the game jam, and we thought, well, everybody could get together, but no, there was still COVID, so we did that online as well. So again, only from the 16, 9 teams went through the next round, and from the 9 teams we selected 3 teams. And I'm very pleased that these 3 teams will be presenting here the results of their work so far. And so it's not going to be the silver bullet. Sorry, Deepak, I wish I could tell you that these 3 projects are the silver bullet, but see them as maybe useful jigsaw puzzle pieces that can help you and can help all of us in reducing the effects or at least give some relief to some people with long COVID. Well, I'm very proud that one of the teams in the hackathon was an actual team from an ICU, the people in the front lines of COVID. And that team from Belgium, amidst of their worrisome times and the horror they've seen in the ICU of an academic hospital, thought that they needed to do something extra. So I'm extremely proud that they are here, that she is here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give the floor to Eline Hagendoorn, and she's from the University Hospital in Leuven, and they have this brilliant project that's called Motiveer Uzelf, and that's an acronym for VR and UZL, that's the University Hospital in Leuven. Ladies and gentlemen, Eline Hagendoorn.
Hi, Thank you, Remco, for the kind introduction, and hi to all of you here in the conference room, but also the people online. I'm Eline Hagedoren. I work as a physiotherapist in the University Hospitals in Leuven, Belgium, and I'm very, very happy that I can present our project, the Motiveer Uzelf, which has become a possibility thanks to VR4Rehab. So, why do we do this project? Well, this is why. It's for the patient. This is actually a picture of my daily clinical environment. So this is what I see every day again. I see patients being in an isolated ICU room, bedridden for weeks or for months even. So it's not difficult to understand that those ICU patients, little by little, they lose hope, they lose motivation. And what are the symptoms now of staying for so many weeks, so many months on an ICU room? Whether it is because of COVID or even because of a non-COVID severe illness, well, symptoms of that is fatigue, environmental deprivation, loss of motivation, and by the end also muscle loss and cognitive impairments. So those symptoms come together with long-term deficits. And it has already been proven that paced early physical activity is the key for having a good long-term functional outcome. But physical activity, so rehabilitation, that's hard work. So how can we keep this patient motivated? How can we enhance and maintain this intrinsic trigger to move? Especially when they are months isolated in a room, so those same four walls, day in, day out. So this is where we find there is a gap of possibilities. And this is where we think that VR could fill in a little bit this gap. So VR has already been quite successful in entertainment and technology industries, also a little bit in rehabilitation. So we get each year a little bit farther in scientific articles for neurological diseases, also for pain, especially in the burn population. But what are the possibilities for those ICU patients? At this time, unfortunately, there is no ICU-specific VR rehabilitation app on the Belgian market yet. So this is why we participate in the VR4Rehab hackathon, and we are very proud that we were one of the winners. And with the funding, thanks to this project, we developed our own app, the Motiveer Uzelf app. And this is our team, so this is we. On the left side, you see me as a physiotherapist to be there to do the clinical implementation of VR for our patients. In the middle, you see Professor Rick Gosselink. He's very well known. He has been doing a lot of research for rehabilitation of internal diseases. So he's there to give the academic support for our project. And on the right side of the picture, you see Renate Hagedoren. She's an intensivist and a medical staff member of our ICU. She's there to give the medical support for our project. So what is it now, our Motiveer Uzelf app? Well, we were looking for what is the most urgent at this point in an ICU. Well, we have already been using a bed cycle already for decades, and that's something that is useful to keep patients motivated to move their legs. But for the arms, most of the time the arms are just laying there. And the only opportunities we have now to train them are like weights or exercise balls or this therapeutic elastic bands. But I can tell you, when you come in for day 100, 150 for this patient, it gets boring. It's boring for the therapist, it's boring for the patient. So this is what we think we should train through virtual reality. So the Motiveer Uzelf is an interactive ICU-specific VR device, and it's an extra tool for physical and occupational therapists in the rehabilitation program to motivate these bedridden ICU patients with a critical illness for exercise training at this stage of the app and the upper limbs, and also neurocognitive training. I will tell you more about that later. At this point, it's still in test phase, a prototype phase, and the goal of the application is to provide extra motivation, extra stimulation for early activity in ICU patients through gamification. So what does it look like? Well, this is a setup. So we have our ICU patient in our department, keeping the consolers in the hand with the VR goggles on his head, with an option for hand tracking when the patient is too weak to hold the consolers. That's also a possibility in our patients. And there is a tablet next to the patient that is used by the therapist to guide the patient through the exercises. So at this point, we have 2 exercises, only 2. It's a prototype. I know we should develop more. That's for the next project. But on the left side, you see the muscular training for painting the picture. So in fact, every time when the patient is moving the arm up and down, he is actually painting. He can go all the way around. And the therapist can alter through the tablet how many strikes there are needed before the complete picture is revealed. On the right side, you see the start for neurocognitive training. It's in fact a memory game. So it's a little bit difficult to see on the picture, but you see one butterfly over there, just flying away. In the beginning, the patient only sees this one butterfly. He can look at it a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, depending on the capacity of the patient. After that, the butterfly flies away, and then the patient will see other butterflies, 3 up to 9 butterflies. The therapist can alter the level of difficulty of that. And the patient has to grab the right one, and it means the right one is the one he just came to see before. So he has to memorize which one he saw, and he has to grab this one. There are a lot of varieties in the game to keep it nice. So what is the plan now with this project? Well, we want to test this VR application on feasibility and safety in an ICU department, because it's a very specific environment, and we want to put this in a clinical study. So where are we now at this point? Well, we have been through a long way of regulatory, safety, and MDR strategies. And I'm very happy to be able to tell you today on this stage that we got the approval from the Federal Agency of Medicines and Health Products in Belgium and their ethic committees since last week. So I'm really pleased about that. So this means we can get started. So I'm very excited to start. And what will we do? So we will include patients who have been on the ICU for at least 3 days. It can be, of course, much more days, but who have a prognosis of staying at least 2 more weeks on the ICU departments. Adult patients in need of physiotherapy who are alert and calm and able to lift at least 1 arm against the gravity. There are some exclusion criteria also, of course, but this will lead me too far. But the patient will get 9 sessions of 30 minutes VR rehabilitation therapy on a frequency of 3 times a week. And this can be combined with other exercises, so with the conventional program for upper limb training and for the neurocognitive training of the ICU patient. So how we will do it, what will we do? Well, this is a setup again. We will register the time for setup, the time for doing the exercises, and the time needed to clean. We will register the physiological parameters, so like blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rates, symptom scores for shortness of breath, and for fatigue. We will, of course, screen for adverse events. That's very important on an ICU patient. And we will screen for occurrences of practical, technical, or logistical problems. And of course, we also look for qualitative data, like, okay, what about the satisfaction of the patient and the therapist about the use of this kind of treatment? We will do this through surveys. So the end goal of this project is the development of a safe and a feasible ICU-specific interactive VR application for motivation for exercise training in long-stay ICU patients, whether it's COVID or a non-COVID disease. And we will put this or try to publish this in a scientific article of our clinical study. And also we hope, of course, to get some business value of this, that it doesn't stay only for our patients in the hospitals of Leuven, but we hope that we can develop this, this application, that it can also be used in other hospitals, and for that also be reachable for patients on other hospitals on the ICU. So we are ready, we are focused to upgrade rehabilitation, classical rehabilitation on an ICU department into the modern world. And I really believe that it's in the interest of both patients and therapists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helene.
Oh.
Let me take that from you. Thank you. Okay, what a brave initiative, and if you can do VR there, you can do it probably anywhere. So very, very good. Next up is a professor you already heard a couple of times during this conference, because he has a lot of questions to ask, so hopefully he has a lot of answers for us as well. Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Ireland. He lives in Northern Ireland, but he works in Southern Ireland, in the University College in Cork. I'm going to introduce Professor Joseph McVeigh, and he will introduce the project called the Exhalers.
Thank you, Remco. Thank you very much, Remco. I only ask questions because I'm nervous, you know. But anyway, so okay. Thank you very much, Remco. My name is Joe McVeigh. I'm from University College Cork in Ireland. I'm here to represent Team Exhalers. So Team Exhalers is a multidisciplinary team of researchers, clinicians, computer scientists, patients and patient advocates, and health innovation specialists. So it's a great team, a fantastic team. And we've spent the last year and a half, trying to come up with a solution, an idea for the rehabilitation of long COVID. So what I'm going to present today is the concept. Okay, so we don't have our product yet, but we spent so long discussing it and going down different avenues and different ideas. We've eventually settled on this here concept, and this is what I'm going to share with you today. We have no conflicts of interest, but the project is funded by Interreg, just to announce that. Okay. So, we've already heard about long COVID. Deepak has very clearly outlined the problem. It's a big problem. 10 million people in Europe, 100 million people worldwide have got this problem. It's extensive. Again, Deepak went into great detail about the presentation of the symptoms and so on. I'm not going to do any of that. Suffice to say that the main symptoms are fatigue, breathlessness, pain, and brain fog, in addition to others. But again, Deepak has outlined, you know, up to 200 symptoms have been identified. On average, patients have about 14 symptoms. It has a major impact on quality of life. It has a major impact on people's ability to do their normal daily activities, to engage in leisure activities, to engage in work. It has a major impact on people's normal life. One of the things, and again, Rachel's story highlighted this to a certain degree, one of the big things that patients complain in is post-exertional malaise or post-exertional symptom exacerbation, very often described as a crash. So patients do a little bit of physical activity, a little bit of normal activity, and as a consequence of engaging in that normal activity, they crash. And that crash is described as severe and prolonged fatigue or complete exhaustion. So it's a really impactful consequence of engaging in normal activities. And that's what we're going to focus on. Or that's what we're focusing on in our problem, or in our solution to long COVID. We're looking at crashing, and we're looking at pacing as a solution to that. So how do we get patients to pace their activities so that they can re-engage in normal activity? But we're doing that within a wraparound of self-management that will address many of the other problems that patients present with. So that's our solution. I'm just going to go through some of that. So pacing is a very simple concept, but it's very difficult. I'll say this and I'll qualify myself. It's very difficult for patients to understand, and it's very difficult for patients to implement. Now, for those of us that heard Nigel speaking, maybe it's about the way we convey that information to our patients. Okay, but it's a difficult concept, very, very simple, but it's difficult for patients to understand and engage with. So it's about activity management. It's an activity management strategy, and it involves balancing physical activity with daily activities and rest. And I'm just going to bring you over this little schematic at the side here, and again, Rachel highlighted some of that. On a good day, patients will feel better. They'll do a little bit more physical activity. They'll feel they're doing well, and then as a consequence of that, they can reduce, they get their symptoms are provoked, and then they crash and burn. And that, in the schematic, it looks as if it's equal, but that crash can be very prolonged. And I've heard patients describe having to go to bed, having to take prolonged bed rest, and it really, really has a major impact. And then they start to feel a little bit better again, they start to increase their activities, and then the boom and bust cycle returns again. So what we want to do is engage patients in physical activity that will allow them to engage in some physical activity without provoking this here boom and bust cycle. And that's perhaps represented a little bit by the dotted line there. So I'm going to charge through some of this here. So the problem as we see it is that people need to learn how to engage in self-management of crashing. And our solution, we're going to wrap that around a self-management strategy, as I said, and the use of XR or VR for experimental learning and safe practice of pacing. Okay, that's in a nutshell. And our plan is to get individuals to train an avatar in VR to prevent crashing while completing ADLs, completing normal activities. And we want to place that pacing within a self-management toolkit and within a wider wraparound based on the pain toolkit, if anyone's familiar with that. So we have 3 components to our solution. The first is a quasi-conversational AI agent, and we're going to use, again, Pete Moore, who is the pain toolkit guru. We're going to use him for that. We're going to have a suite of self-management skills that the patients can engage in, and we'll have a VR task performance and crash prevention pacing game. So the quasi-conversational AI agent is it's created by this company Storyfile, who use interactive technology that allows the user to engage with the video. Okay, so we're currently video recording Pete at the moment, and he's asked a lot of questions and he gives us response, and then when we set it up, the patients will be able to engage with this. Now, Storyfile have done this here with Captain Kirk, and actually they market this here towards your grandparents. So your grandparents can tell their story, and their grandchildren and their children's grandchildren can engage with them. I'll very quickly play Captain Kirk.
Hi, William. What was it like working with Leonard Nimoy?
I think we must have ad-libbed some of the things. The thing is about Leonard was he was very, very funny. We, I guess during those years, but certainly afterwards, we would go out to Star Trek conventions on a Saturday and get on stage, and he would make me laugh.
Okay, so it's just very, very brief clip. But this interactive video actually has AI technology behind it. Don't ask me, I'm not a technologist, but it has it behind it, and it can learn from the questions that are posed to it. So the second component, as I've mentioned, is a suite of self-management skills or self-management toolkit. That'll consist of 12 self-management skills such as pacing, prioritizing, planning, goal setting, problem solving, mindful movement, and so on and so forth. We've all heard of those before. They'll be graphically illustrated and video with video explanation within the package, let's put it that way. And the third component is the pacing game. So the pacing game, and we've seen examples of this here before over the conference, where people engage with activities of daily living. I put here, a cooking simulator, but it could be going to the shop, it could be getting dressed, it could be any normal daily activity. But the user will teach the avatar these various skills while at the same time pacing, planning, and prioritizing those actions. The players control this crash risk avatar, so the aim is not to get the avatar to crash. So as the avatar is doing the activities, you can see the battery will decrease in the amount of energy it has, and the aim of the game is to teach the user how to pace, get the avatar to complete the task without crashing. Okay. I was going to, well, I don't think this video will play, but it's really based on this here principle, tell, show, and safe practice. And my colleague, Dennis Martin, used this quotation. If I wanted you to understand, I would have explained it better, from that philosophical guru, Johann Cruyff. And again, you can see here where he explained the Cruyff turn. Many of you will be familiar with that. It works to a certain degree, but it only works so far as it goes. If the video worked, I would show you the Johann Cruyff turn, but you're all familiar with it anyway. But that we can show it to them, and then we get the user to practice that in VR in a safe space. Okay, that's the principle that underpins it, but the video won't work here. So in terms of our progress to date, we developed the concept, and it is important to say that we developed this concept with our patient partners and our patient advocates. So again, it's about the patient. We can't emphasize that enough. In terms of our development, Storyfile are starting to Video Pete in July, so we have funding in place and that's going to happen. We have a software, Billy, our software engineer, is starting to make the game. Our next steps, our previous colleague talked about the importance of research. Research and evidence is fundamental. To emphasize that again, if we want to take VR solutions forward, there has to be the hard-nosed evidence, hardcore evidence to support it. And I'm absolutely delighted to hear that my colleague, I don't know where she is, but that she got medical device regulation approval. That's a major stumbling block for us all. And again, that's really important to bring these solutions forward. So thank you very much for listening. That's our solution. A few references, my email address and Twitter account is there. So with 28 seconds to go, thank you very much indeed.
Well, Joe, nothing to be nervous about. What a brilliant project. And again, it shows that that if you do such things in great teams, it might take a little bit longer, but then the solution will be a little bit more robust.
Hopefully.
And hopefully. So once again, thank you. Thank you
you
very
very
much.
much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joseph McVeigh.
Thank you.
Well, while we were doing this competition, because there was some money involved as well. The best teams got rewarded with some EU funding. The jury was stunned by the beauty of one of the concepts, and we later understand that this concept already came from the creative industry. The creative industry who built a beautiful virtual reality environment which is now being used for long COVID patients. So I'm going to introduce a colleague who's working for Radboud University Medical Center, Joanneke Weertmeester, and she's going to introduce Explore Deep. Joanneke, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Joanneke and I'm from the Radboud University, not the medical center, but that happens all the time, so don't worry. Yeah, I'm proud to present our project called Deep. And Deep is a virtual reality experience controlled by breathing. So breathing is a very core component to life and a very important core component of our health. So if something goes awry with our health, then that can lead to very detrimental issues. And one vivid example of this was, of course, the recent COVID epidemic, where COVID, of course, targeted a lot of our respiratory system. And yeah, luckily there were a lot of people who recovered fairly well, but as was of course also mentioned earlier, a lot of people unfortunately also were left with very long-lasting symptoms and a wide variety of symptoms. Some symptoms that we would already think of, such as, for instance, shortness of breath or trouble breathing, but also things like fatigue, but also mental health issues like anxiety and depression. But dysregulation in breathing is not only common in long COVID, but also, for instance, seems to be very prevalent among patients with functional disorders. And of course, we want to do something to help these people because they need it. But the treatments that we have now are not always working as well as we would like them to. For instance, issues with accessibility, as mentioned before. Also, adherence is a big challenge, so that you're engaged and motivated enough to keep practicing to actually improve. And our hope is that by using well-designed digital interventions, we can help with this problem. So our solution was a game called Deep. And the game merges art and game design and science to actually provide a playful sort of breathing exercise environment. So the way it works is it combines virtual reality and breath-based biofeedback. And that works in this way. So you actually control the game by using your own breath. That is the way that you move through the game. And the game also provides feedback on what your breath is doing. So the main way that people control the game is that they wear this belt around their diaphragm with a stretch sensor in it. And it measures how deeply you breathe in and out through the diaphragm. And that is also the way that you move. The breathing is inputted as the controls. It almost sort of works like diving. So if you breathe in, you go up. And if you breathe out, you kind of go down again. And the whole world also mirrors your breathing directly back to you. For instance, in the plants, but also this circle that you see here. So it really increases this awareness of your breath and your body. And so in this way, it kind of encourages you to use deep diaphragmatic breathing Because if you breathe very shallowly, for instance, you'll notice that you'll stay more on the bottom floor, and then you can't explore this beautiful world. Yeah, so breathing is the main way that you control the game, but we're also looking into different ways to control the game. So for instance, with hand movements, just continuously looking for more accessible ways to use the game. So actually the game didn't just come to be throughout VR4Rehab, it actually has existed for quite some time. And it actually originally started as more of an artful game experience. At that time, around 2014, 2015, was initiated by Owen Harris, together with Nikki Smith as the co-founders, artists and game designers that at the time when the first Oculus headset for more general use was released, they wanted to provide a nice, calming, playful sanctuary for their players. And that is where they started. But over the years, the team has expanded with more artists joining, more developers joining, and also a team of scientists from the Radboud University that wanted to collaborate with them. And they were very surprised by this initially. But at the time, my professor, Isabel Granick, worked at the Games for Emotional Mental Health Lab, where we were looking into whether we could use game experiences as treatment for young people. And we were, DEEP was brought to our attention, and we thought, wow, this is such a nice, playful way of teaching kids this deep diaphragmatic breathing, which we know that is already a well-known stress regulation technique. So we joined the team, and I joined my PhD afterwards. Over the years after that, we're very lucky to get Sarah Tico on board as well, who has a very expansive knowledge of virtual reality in the medical field. So yeah, growing and growing. So my role in the DEEP team, starting from around 2016 when I started my PhD, I started doing some research into whether we could use DEEP and further develop DEEP as a treatment tool for youth with anxiety and stress. So to summarize years of research in one single slide, which is almost impossible, we did several studies, some smaller studies, but also a larger randomized control trial with anxious youths. And overall, we found some very promising results, showing that by playing DEEP, people were able to feel more calm afterwards on the shorter term, but also with more extensive practice, really decreasing core anxiety symptoms. And another interesting thing I personally think is that it didn't just seem to help people regulate their anxiety, but it also seemed to change something about the way that they perceive their own abilities. So for instance, we saw that through the training, there was an increase in self-efficacy. And we know that this is very important for mental health, but also treatment outcomes. So if you want to look into all of the research, you can find it in my beautiful dissertation or in all of the sources online. But yeah, so we started initially more from a space of anxiety and focusing on that. But because breathing is such a trans-diagnostic mechanism, naturally our world started to expand more and more, and people started to contact us from different fields. For instance, there are people who wanted to see whether we could use it for youth with PTSD or patients with COPD. And then came, of course, the call for VR4Rehab. And they were looking for virtual reality experiences that could help people with long COVID. And we thought, well, this is, of course, the perfect match. So we were glad to sign up for the challenge. So within VR4Rehab, what we wanted to do was to see whether we could take DEEP into a more clinical context and see whether we could help people who suffer from long COVID. But while we were looking for partners who were working with people with long COVID, we were actually contacted from a different area, namely experts who were working with people with a wide variety of functional disorders. And they believed that it could also help these patients as well. So we were happy to collaborate with them. And that is why the current team exists like this. So we have on the right side, we have Dr. Bram van der Borst from the Radboud University Medical Center, who is working in Dekkerswald, which is also a rehabilitation center focused on lung issues, but has a very big database of people and patients suffering from long COVID. And then we have a lovely PhD student called Saya Niwa from Rockland Medical University, an etude network who's looking into whether maybe breathing dysregulation could be a mechanism underlying a lot of functional disorders, and whether we could use things like DEEP to help them. And then we have Dr. Christina Müller from the Therapie Kliniek Sint Mauritius Rehabilitation Center to see whether we could also use it for their patients there to improve their rehabilitation. So yeah, what we want to do and we have the team together, and we're looking forward to the next steps. So we're trying to set up feasibility studies to see, well, is DEEP actually effective to help these patients? But very importantly, and most importantly, is that we want to gather information from the patients and the clinicians who will be working with the patients, gather information on how we can improve DEEP as it is now to better fit their needs and their implementation needs. So we're currently trying to set up the study and all the ethical approval and stuff like that, and hopefully we'll be able to change DEEP in a way that better fits this patient population and in a way that can help them. Yeah, so that is where we're at. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Anneke. I think it's. I think this illustrates that it takes a long breath from a concept like DEEP to become to be useful and impactful in healthcare. Science is needed, patience is needed, but well, you're getting there. And if you look where you started and you see the enormous amount of parties you're working with, that's quite impressive. So keep up the good work and good luck with the study, and hopefully it can be truly impactful for those who suffer from long COVID as well. All right, then we have 2 more projects to show you. Projects in the spotlight, they're called. And the first one is a project called DigiVid. I've never seen it before, so I'm very eager to learn it. And presenting DigiVid is Sebastian Hofstetter, and he's affiliated to the Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg in Germany. So, welcome Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Sebastian Hofstetter. I'm research fellow at the medical faculty of Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg. Our project is called COVID-19, or DigiVid, Digital Physiotherapeutical Application for long COVID therapy or post-COVID therapy. Yeah, the disclosure slide. We are funded by the BMBF, also there, yes, by the German Education and Research Ministry. So, and what I'm going to tell you today, it's a little bit about our approach. Why have we planned this DigiVid program? Our co-creative technological development process, then the project DigiVid, what we are planning to do, how we are doing what we are doing, and our lessons learned till today. There are many lessons we've learned. So the background of our study is, yes, we've heard a lot about the long COVID problematic. We start to write the application for this program in the maybe March or April 2020, very short after the COVID problems occurred. And we ask ourselves, okay, what's going on with these people who get COVID or got COVID then? And after they finished their disease, how can they get some rehabilitation approach for maybe breath support? So this was at the year 2020, maybe February or March. The innovations are developed past the actual needs of care professionals at those affected. That's a problem by a lot of medical applications or something like this. I guess the evidence is very often not shown. Participatory methods of development shouldn't be more in the focus of medical application development. I've heard a lot about this today also, is more in the focus now. And as our Professor Meyer from Martin Luther University pointed out, there is a theory discussion regarding technology-supported interventions very necessary with the needs and acceptance of the group of people involved, as well as the consequences and effects resulting from medical application devices. So we tried to fix these topics or bring them together in our project. And yeah, I think I will not tell you a lot about the DigiVid-19 backgrounds concerning the symptoms or post-COVID, long-COVID symptoms, because we've heard a lot about the symptoms much more better than I can present this. So, but the most important topic, I think, is post-acute persistent symptoms in the most cases. Also, I got COVID, and I also think or feel it's not already gone till today. So then in the German background, we have big lack of access to post-inpatient rehabilitation services with special focus of physiotherapists, because yes, as well as nurses, the personnel in the nurses' capacity is shrinking. Also, physiotherapist personnel is very low. We have not enough, especially in the rural parts of Germany. So we thought about to bring a possibility to bring people and physiotherapy together. And yes, the urgent need for easily accessible lung-specific rehabilitation after long COVID in the home environment, maybe with special focus on long COVID or post-COVID rehabilitation. So we thought about the development and the evaluation of an immersive VR application for home respiratory therapy and stress reduction for patients after SARS-CoV-2 infection, restoring and securing the access to individual post-inpatient rehabilitation services, and increase of compliance also through gamification for ensuring high level of user acceptance also. Our therapy outline, as shown here on the slide, is some kind of physical training for sure, then teaching the breathing techniques training or having a breathing techniques training. Then it should also be some kind of immersion and react on the high individualized long COVID. Yeah, every patient has different or individual symptoms, or so it should react in somehow. And the monitoring of the progress is also very important. We thought about how to register the maybe change in the constitution of the patient. So this was one of our first ideas. I will show you this picture, but we reduced it a lot. As you can see maybe now in this short video. Is it also the green button to start the video, or yeah? Oh, okay, this is just, as I thought, a shortcut. Yeah, you can see here, compared to the picture before, we reduced a lot of colors and impressions out of the video because we recognized that most people, as more as it's inside this video, the people start concentrating, especially at the beginning, onto the lot of colors, lot of things around, as less. And one of my speakers before, he mentioned sometimes less is more. I can agree, and especially with elderly people, less is much more than more. So you can choose different levels, especially to if you if your condition changed, so, and to handle this all, I'm a Japanese scientist and health and nursing care scientist, so no idea about technological development. Also, I'm very interested into healthcare technologies. We try to fix a co-creational approach, that's how we call it, as an open, active and creative process in which all relevant stakeholders, also the patients, are engaged in an innovation process. So this concerns active and committed decision-making about a meaningful problem through respect, interactions and dialogue, where everyone's voice is considered as best as possible. So our group consists of our research group from Martin Luther University, also the the university clinic, the Department of Inner Medicine, the pneumological unit. Then the physiotherapeutic concept was developed by Lichter-Schatten Therapy Center. It's a physiotherapeutic physiotherapeutic praxis in Berlin. The colleagues also studied Master of Health and Science Nursing Care, have a Master of Science. Then a technological development partner, prefrontaler cortex. They are VR, AR designers. And when we start the project in 2020, nobody knows about long COVID consequences. That's why we try to bring in patients from the COPD Germany group to get their user experience with lung problems. Meanwhile, this changed. We have a lot of participants with long COVID symptomatic, so this is a little bit new situation. But yeah, the patient, the users, the end users are also integrated. Our development process is like I tried to show you here. We have the starting point with idea finding, and we made a needs and demands assessment together with the user groups. We ask them, what are your problems? You have to think about it. We start asking them, this have been COPD patients. What's your problem with your diseases? And if you could tell your wishes for such an application to a developer, what do you need or what are your wishes in the development process? Then we developed a first prototype, and we brought this first prototype back to the users and let them reassess the prototype for good and bad things from their point of view. And this new feedback, the developers newly integrated into the redevelopment of the prototype, and this process, during the project period, we can do it 3-4 times. So, and then we will hopefully have a final prototype at the end of this year. So, starting from next year, the BMBF in Germany, the ministry, gave us 1 more year to fulfill our study, to get the evidence of the DigiVit application together with the pneumological unit. We try a SUS assessment, system usability scale assessment together with focus groups, further development, and then a final prototype, and then starting next year, the clinical evaluation of the efficiency of the DigiVit application. yeah, our long-term goals are evidence of positive effects in clinical trials for sure, but this is not just our long-term goal. I think this should be the long-term goal of all developments in this direction. And then, you mentioned in the talk this morning the famous DIGA situation in Germany. Certification as a medical device. I think it's not such as easy as it seems to get the DIGA certificate, but hopefully earlier or later this will happen. And yeah, registration as a digital health app then in the DIGA catalog. The lessons learned are difficulties into finding technical partners for fundamental research and to bring together the very sometimes different opinions between research, university background and local partners. You have to translate or find the same level of speech. What are you speaking about? What are your goals? This was at the beginning very underestimated. I think we've learned a lot concerning this topic. High regulatory hurdles. I have the German situation. Maybe Germans are more into regulatory hurdles than other countries, but the DIGA I mentioned before, to enter the DIGA process, this is a very hard procedure, not so early done. The DIGA, at the end, they took just 3 months to prove your application, but to get the chance for an application, this is took a long time and is very stressful. Yeah, and I mentioned before, also find a common language between the participating partners, stakeholders. What are you talking if you talk about symptoms or something, and what is the technological partner talking about? This have to bring together to fulfill yeah, a good development process. Yeah, then I'm just in time, I would say. I hope I could give you a short insight into our project, and hopefully next year then the final presentation with the results. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a promise, Sebastian, and well, we all suffer from, fighting the MDR regulation, fighting off people who won't grant us the ethical committee approval and so on. So you should definitely have a drink with Dr. Christina Müller here. She has some stories to share about that as well. And it has nothing to do with Germany, because we suffer all, and we get our fair share of those bureaucratic dragons we need to fight. All right, next up is a project from the Netherlands, from the University Medical Center in Rotterdam, Erasmus. And this project is called Horizon IC Study. So I'm going to give the floor to Hans Vlaken.
Welcome everybody, my name is Hans Vlaken and I'm a PhD candidate at the Erasmus Medical Center and the Franciscus Gasthuis in Vlietland, both in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I would first like to thank the organization for having me here and you for all for being here. I would like to tell you something today about the research we have been conducting on the use of virtual reality after an ICU treatment. I have no conflicts of interest to declare besides having obtained a PhD grant from Beta Kete. Each year, over 70,000 patients are admitted to the intensive care units of the Netherlands each year. Due to technical advances, more and more of these patients survive their ICU stay, resulting in over 60,000 ICU survivors each year in the Netherlands alone. These ICU survivors are at risk of developing new or worsening impairments in their physical, cognitive, or mental health status, arising after critical illness and persisting beyond acute care hospitalization. These impairments are collectively referred to as the post-intensive care syndrome, or PICS. PICS comprises symptoms such as pulmonary or neuromuscular deficits, memory deficits or attention deficits, and psychological impairments such as anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Important to know is that these psychological impairments do not only occur in the ICU patients, but also in their relatives. Then we talk about the post-intensive care syndrome family, or PICS-F. These symptoms are highly prevalent and result in a decreased quality of life. And recent research has demonstrated that the psychological impairments of the post-intensive care syndrome have the most profound impact on the quality of life, and therefore are the most important to treat. Last years, several interventions have been explored to improve these outcomes, such as organizing ICU follow-up clinics, keeping ICU diaries, or offering psychosocial support already during the hospitalization. However, studies have failed to demonstrate a reduced effect in terms of psychological recovery or health-related quality of life, and as such, we do not have an evidence-based effective intervention to improve the psychological outcomes of ICU survivors. We therefore looked into the literature to find other treatment options and found VR. To be more precise, virtual reality exposure therapy. Virtual reality exposure therapy, or VRET, is proven effective for the treatment of non-ICU related post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety, and we hypothesized that this intervention could also be used to improve the outcomes of critical illness survivors. We therefore developed an intensive care unit-specific virtual reality intervention, ICU VR. Within this intervention, patients are simultaneously exposed to the ICU environment, traumatizing them, as being educated about the treatment they received. Within the intervention, patients are virtually brought back to the ICU and welcomed by an ICU nurse and an ICU physician. Thereafter, they are laid down in an ICU bed, toured around the ICU, and brought to one of the ICU rooms. In this room, patients receive explanation about the treatment in the ICU, such as the devices and monitors which are placed in the ICU with their corresponding alarm noises, about the mechanical ventilation, including the intubation and the tracheostoma, also about the IV drips and lines that are used within the ICU, about the treatment team that is daily taking care of them, and about the disease for which they have been treated. We developed the first version of ICU VR back in 2018, and even made the news by doing so. We also started doing research back then, first in healthy volunteers, because we know that virtual reality can provoke cyber sickness, also called simulator sickness, and very comparable to motion sickness. It consists of symptoms such as nausea, dizziness, and disorientation. Because we know that cyber sickness is most often caused by the content of VR, rather than the technique itself, we wanted to determine to what extent our intervention provoked cyber sickness, and additionally explored whether our intervention resulted in immersiveness. Immersiveness is the feeling of being present in the virtual environment, and a key indicator for the level of exposure someone is experiencing. We therefore included 45 healthy volunteers, which are randomized across seeing the intervention in VR or using a 2D flat screen. We found that the virtual reality version did provoke more cyber sickness, but cyber sickness scores were still very low, not clinically relevant, and none of these sessions had to be interrupted due to side effects. We also found that the virtual reality version did result in much higher immersion scores, indicating that healthy volunteers felt more exposed to the ICU environment in VR. We then conducted our first study in ICU patients. We included 50 sepsis patients who were mechanically ventilated for at least 24 hours, and these were also randomized to either receive the ICU VR intervention or not. Patients who did receive the ICU intervention could self-determine when to initiate with the VR within a 2-week window after ICU discharge. And after initiation with VR, they were offered to use the VR intervention for the consecutive 7 days, for us to determine how many sessions are desired among patients. We found that we could start with VR approximately 8 days after ICU discharge, and that patients desired a median of 2 VR sessions. We also found that the ICU VR intervention was also saving critical illness survivors, and we found that patients who were exposed to the ICU VR intervention reported less symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, less symptoms of depression, and a higher mental quality of life up to 1 month after initiation with VR. We were then faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, and because the COVID-19 ICU treatment is slightly different from the general ICU treatment, we altered our ICU version to make it COVID-19 specific. Because we altered the intervention, we first tested the altered version of ICU VR in a single patient who was admitted for COVID-19 to the Erasmus Medical Center. And we found similar effects. Psychological distress decreased and health-related quality of life increased. Because it was not feasible to offer the intervention in this study already during the hospitalization, due to COVID-19 regulations, of course, we chose to examine whether the ICU VR intervention could also be incorporated in existing ICU care, which most often takes place in the form of ICU follow-up clinics 3 months after ICU discharge. Within this trial, patients who were admitted for COVID-19 to the ICUs of Rotterdam were randomized to either see or not see the intervention during the visit to the ICU follow-up clinic. Unfortunately, we did not find any effects on psychological distress or quality of life, but we did find that those patients who received the ICU VR intervention were more satisfied with the ICU aftercare and would recommend the ICU VR intervention to other ICU patients. The lack of effect on psychological distress may also be attributed to the fact that patients from the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic experienced less psychological distress compared to the general ICU population. Another important finding from the study is that the relatives who often came along with the patient to the ICU follow-up clinic did suffer from psychological distress, and almost all relatives wanted to see the ICU intervention as well. We therefore decided to also conduct a study in relatives of ICU patients to see whether we could reduce the stress during the ICU stay by showing them the ICU VR intervention. As this study is still ongoing, I do not have any results on this study yet, but I thought it was interesting to share with you. At this moment, we know that ICU VR is safe, both in healthy volunteers as in patients. We know that it's feasible, both shortly after ICU discharge, as seen in the sepsis trial, as later on during an ICU follow-up clinic, as seen in the COVID-19 trial. It seems more effective when offered shortly after ICU discharge, but this may also attribute it to the cohort we chose in our second study. Therefore, we are now conducting the Horizon IC study to definitely determine the effect of ICU VR on psychological recovery and health-related quality of life after an ICU treatment. In this study, the primary aim is to determine the effect of ICU VR on symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And secondly, we aim to determine the effects on anxiety, depression, and health-related quality of life. Also, we aim to determine what is the optimal timing for ICU VR, either shortly after ICU discharge or later on during an ICU follow-up clinic visit 3 months after ICU discharge. Within this study, we aim to include 300 ICU patients, which will again be randomized across 3 groups. The control group does not receive ICU VR, but will be invited to the ICU follow-up clinic. The early ICU VR group will receive ICU VR shortly after ICU discharge, within 2 weeks within the hospital ward, and will also be invited to the ICU follow-up clinic. The late ICU VR group does not receive ICU VR within the hospital, but will receive ICU VR during the visit to the ICU follow-up clinic. We will use validated questionnaires to assess the psychological distress and health-related quality of life, and to determine if there are differences between these 3 groups. Well, like I said, we started in the Franciscus Gasthuis, and during our second study, the Erasmus Medical Center participated also, and now our intervention can be found in 9 Dutch hospitals, of which we are very proud, of course. And in the end of the summer, our first Belgium site will also participate, the University Medical Center of Brussels. Also very proud of that. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Hans. You did leave us some time for questions, so what a powerful study. Thank you. I immediately have to think about Eline. Where are you, Eline? What do you think of this initiative?
I love it, but it's a little bit... sorry. Hi, thank you for the great presentation. Yeah, thank you. I have been looking into your literature when I was looking up for ICU possibilities. And it took me a while before I realized that your ICU-specific therapy is actually for PICS, so the post-ICU phase. So it was a little bit tricky name for me to see that it's not used, if I understand correctly, on the ICU, but the post-ICU. So, but I think it could be joined together. So I think we could already start in the ICU to try to prevent the PICS syndrome. And if this not work, if it's not possible to prevent, then hopefully early after a discharge on the ICU, that we can indeed use this therapy. If I understand correctly, you study more the psychology and the anxiety problems after that. So I'm really looking forward to have the results of your Horizon study.
Yeah, sounds great. And your study was also very interesting. We were also in the past looking for, could we also use virtual reality while the patients are in the ICU, for instance, for physical therapy. So your study really, I like it very well.
If you like to scale up, there are already 9 Dutch hospitals included here. So
I'm not joking, you can contact me.
Okay, I will.
Well, you see already the VR network is already working. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Hans over here? Deepak.
Just curious to find out there, is your, so just to take into account there, just in terms of implementation part there, what hardware would you need? And is that the same as your hardware? I.e., is it Oculus or Pico or whatever?
Yeah, we used to use the Oculus, but we switched from partners when we started the Horizon IC study, so we are now working with the Pico 2G 4K glasses, if I'm right. So those are the standalone headsets, because we visit the patients throughout the hospital, and then it would be very impractical if we had to take a computer with us each time. And the software we are using, it's not needing a lot of graphical power or computational power, so the standalone headsets are good for us.
Because I see so much power, and it is a challenging problem. It's present in both ways there. Thing is, if we can have a collaboration that is one piece of thing for the patient to have, where both are combined, I know the challenges of combining both, but a collaborative venture here will make it easy for the patient, and probably for another hospital, for example, in my hospital in the UK, to actually take one piece of platform and one thing,
yeah, that would be
than
great
two separate things in two places. You see, that is the piece. So really happy to see the collaboration work out.
Okay. Oh, there's a now we're talking. Now we're doing business. All right.
Sorry. No, I love the question because we saw in my department, the ICU department, that a lot of hardware goggles have this battery on the back. That's not possible for our patients because they are laying down in the bed. They cannot be sitting up in the bed. So just by looking into the VR worlds, the battery changed and the goggles fell off. So like stupid things, but important. So the hardware needs to be something flat on the back, or maybe in the future nothing on the back. So that would be great. And indeed, if the goggles can just travel with the patient through the therapy from early onset in the ICU till discharge at home, would be great. And for use in the hospital, I guess you have the same problem. It's also very important about the data protection problems with the hardware. So we need to be careful for that too.
Yeah, okay, indeed.
Well, okay, Hans, any more questions? No. Well, I want to thank you for this great presentation. I'm always impressed by the people from Rotterdam. They're bold. They're doing a study, 300 inclusions. Bam, bam, bam. Yeah, that's it. You need a Rotterdammer to quit talking and do business. So perfect, perfect. Well, we come towards the end of the show. And of course, it's been a long 2 days for you as our delegates, but it's been a long preparation for us. And I think it's fair to say that there's one person in this room that deserves basically all the credits for organizing this and for helping us out and to making this fantastic event occur at all. And that's Sylvia de Bruin. So Sylvia, please come up here. Sylvia had her own company organizing conferences, but then COVID came along, and she basically lost a lot of her regular conferences, and I needed a project manager for VR4Rehab. So I gave Sylvia a call, and luckily she said yes, and I'm so glad that you're with the team. So thank you very much, Sylvia. Okay, I was inspired by how this worked out last year. I was in this empty, in the same hall, but it was empty, talking to a camera. Now I'm talking to people of flesh and blood, and I loved it. So next year, on the 29th and the 30th of June, we will do this again. We will, so please write it down in your calendars already. We will do VR4Rehab in June next year. So I hope you all come back. I hope you all are a little bit encouraged and assured that what you're doing is relevant, that what you're doing is important, and that what you're doing is pushing healthcare and the quality of life for all of us ahead. So good luck to all of your studies, all of your work, and all of your businesses. And I hope I'll see you again in 2023. And now for the final thing, we have a small drink, so I hope you don't run out immediately. Have a drink, have a chat. Thank you very, very much.